Welcome back. A few nights ago, when my wife took the kids to a play, because we do have some culture here in Texas, besides guns and oil and beef, I decided to enter a Blitz tournament on Lichess and thought I would make a video for this channel about it. Not this video. I was making a live video as I was playing the games. As it turned out, it went really poorly, so I am making this video instead. I lost all 4 games, as I said, and let's go through them really quick. In the first game, I was surprised that I was not paired with someone near my rating level. I was paired with someone rated over 2,000 Blitz on Lichess, whereas in Blitz on Lichess, I'm rated in the mid-1300s. So I played the Scandinavian, which is the opening as black I'm most familiar with, or the best response to e4 for me, just because I've studied several of the lines. I played the modern variation. I didn't play it perfectly, but I was near equality up to about move 7, move 8, but then here I blundered, and now white has a huge advantage. So I played on. My opponent had done, I forget what it's called, where they only use half their time in order to get double the points, and there's a name for it on Lichess. Is it Berserk mode? Maybe that's what it is. So I thought, if nothing else, maybe I can get them into time trouble. And then as it turned out, here I thought that was a mistake. And as it turns out, as I'm analyzing, you can see that's a huge blunder. And that's because of this and that. So that was 2 blunders in a row, actually, on their part. So now I have a 7-point advantage, which I maintained for about 7 moves. I knew here I'm up a piece, or at least an exchange, right? I'm up a rook for a knight at this point, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm thinking, like, there's got to be a way I can win this. I have 2 rooks. They don't. And then here, that's just a free knight. Not entirely free, but I didn't take it because I thought I needed both of these pieces to guard that rook. But instead, Stockfish says I can take this knight. Let them have this rook. I can take this rook. When they take my knight, I can block here. And look at that. I've simplified, cleared off most of the board, and I'm still ahead on material. But instead, in this position, instead of taking this knight with the rook, I took the knight with the knight, which removes one of the defenders of this rook, which was the whole reason I didn't take with the rook. So, of course, my opponent captured there. Now, I knew I shouldn't capture back. And now we're at equality due to my taking that knight with the wrong piece. But Stockfish says I should have moved one of these pawns. But instead, I moved my queen, which was the last remaining defender of this rook. And of course, my opponent took. I realized what I had done, and I resigned. The good thing about playing a player with a rating that high is I didn't lose any points for losing the game, any rating points. My opponent only gained 1 point, despite having berserked. Let's look at the second game. In the second game, I was disappointed to see that my opponent was rated 250 points higher than me. Not as bad as the first one, but not great. All right, here I opened with my normal d4 opening, trying to play the London system. I got as far as about right there with my London system, and then my opponent played e5. Here, Stockfish is saying I can just pull this bishop back to g3, and then I'll be fine. I wasn't sure exactly how it would all pan out if they started taking here. We started trading there because I know they have the bishop. I'm not sure what else they can bring. They're going to put the knight up here. So I just took that pawn, kind of as in an England Gambit situation. Of course, in the England Gambit, the D pawn isn't protecting it. But anyway, I took the pawn with which Stockfish says is not that bad, and they took back. Now here, definitely, here there's not even a question. I have to pull the bishop back to g3, or put it on g5, threatening the queen. But what I did instead was I took that pawn. And you see the numbers just falling out. Now I have a huge disadvantage. And I didn't quite realize it at first until after I had castled and then lost that bishop. And then I realized, wait, I'm down a piece. I'm down a bishop for a pawn. And it happened kind of quickly. And I played on for a little while, trying to make the best of it, hoping that the opponent would blunder at some point. But they really didn't. I never got close to equality again. And like I said, we played on, I tried. But as each piece got traded off, taken away, I can't get out of that. I'm going to lose my queen, and so I resigned in that one. And in this one, I only lost 3 points, and my opponent only gained 2 rating points due to how far ahead of me they already were. Let's go into the third game. Now, I thought surely after those first 2, at least by my third game, I would get someone close to my rating level, close to my knowledge level, skill level. But instead, I got a 1991 rated Blitz player and it had the black pieces. So, not happy, decided a glutton for punishment, let's just go. They opened with e4, so again, I played the Scandinavian, modern variation. And they played an inaccuracy on move 3. And I know that's an inaccuracy. I know that now I can take this pawn. And if they take back, I take with my queen. If they don't take back, I can take there and damage their pawn structure. They didn't take back. But we're at equality on move 4, which I thought was pretty great, especially against a player. Because I've played this position so many times, I know without looking, without having to wait for the analysis, that I'm at about equality here. It's my game to lose. I can mess it up, but I'm in an okay situation. So I've messed up White's pawn structure already. Their H-pawn is isolated, and they have a weird structure here in the middle. Not too bad. The downside is, unlike what I normally get to do in the Scandinavian, I have not developed any pieces at this point. But we did okay. See, that was a problem right there. I should have just taken this pawn. But instead I advanced, trying to chase the knight out. But my opponent blundered. And if only I would just put my bishop right here to keep chasing and harassing that knight, then I continue to have a tempo. But I did not. And then I blunder again. My opponent now has a 7-point advantage. But then they blundered most of it away. And I'm not that far behind. But then here I blundered again, and now I'm far behind again. They're just going to take this rook. But they didn't. They took the pawn instead. That was a blunder. Now they barely have an advantage. Of course, here I only have one legal move, so I made that legal move. Then they blundered a second time in a row. Right now they're just supposed to take this pawn. But instead they checked here. Look at the evaluation. If I will just slide my king in there, I'm going to be okay. And then, yes, they can check me with the pawn, but I'll take back with the queen, and I'll be fine. But I took the pawn instead. But then my opponent blundered. Almost back at equality again. Now I just need to take this with my queen. But instead, I took with the rook. Huge blunder. So now my opponent's supposed to check here, but instead they checked there. So we're back to a near equality again. If only I will just put my queen here. But instead I moved out of check. And look at that. Look what's coming. Instead of just moving the rook, they longside castled. And at that point, I resigned. But I didn't lose any points for losing that game. I was encouraged, however, especially upon doing the analysis, that I had equality several times against a player rated nearly 600 points. More than 600 points higher than me. And just as with a 2,000 rated player, where I had an advantage for a little while and gave it away. Here, I gave away the equality each time I was offered. That's encouraging because it means that if I just correct a few of these tactical errors, like this one, I was just asking for it here, that the rook could obviously move to that spot, even if the king was no longer able to castle. Correct a few of these tactical problems, and I should be playing at the level of these much higher rated players. Let's go look at the last game. For the last game, I was pleasantly surprised that I was paired with someone very close to my rating level, just about 15 points higher than me. But On a spur-of-the-moment decision, I decided not to open with d4 for once in a long time. I opened with e4. I haven't played this in a while, except against my son for fun. And they opened with c6, which is the Caro-Kann. One of the openings I've been studying is black, so I was pretty sure I knew some decent lines against this. Now, when I play the Caro-Kann as black, I hate the advanced variation. I do very poorly against it. But I also haven't studied this as white, so I wasn't sure what the next thing to do would be if I played that. I did know about the exchange variation. I know still have a tempo here, and I can get the first piece developed. So I played the exchange variation, which allows me to develop, which I did. And we did okay. Here, my opponent blunders because I can give a check. And yes, they can block. They can block with the knight, which also guards the bishop. But then I can play b4. And they start running out of places to go. Apparently, playing b4 first just doesn't work. So that returned the blunder in kind. But I have this huge space advantage on the queen side. I felt I was doing very well. I'm castled. Look at this. I've got all my pieces except this knight developed. My king is safe. My opponent still hasn't developed these two pieces. Still has their king stuck in the middle. I have a huge space advantage. The knight jumps in. I push forward. Look at that. I ran into this several times when I played the Caro-Kann as black. White gets this huge space advantage. I feel trapped and undeveloped. So I knew as white, I think I'm doing pretty good. I know that black's feeling cramped and undeveloped. Here I should have developed my knight. Not sure exactly where after that. Maybe to put it in front of the pawn, to blockade that pawn. But instead I played this pawn here. This knight here, thinking to go after the bishop. They took and I took, which is kind of a problem because now my space advantage starts to slip away. Now black has a hole to push through. They finally get this other knight out. And they're about ready to castle, I think. But instead they played here, which is a kind of a weak mate threat. It does threaten mate, so I do have to do something about it. And I found out later, the correct response is to play g3, which I wasn't sure about that because I thought the knight's going to go here next, isn't it? That's what I was thinking. And so I thought this pawn won't actually protect against that because this pawn will still be pinned by the queen. And I also thought, the queen's doing nothing here without the bishop, so I decided to block the bishop. I didn't know that was a huge blunder until later. It looks like it stops that threat. Well, then black goes here. Whoops, threatening this. But also threatening mate again. So here it says my best move is g3 once again. But I played g4, which turns out to be an even bigger blunder. But I have to move that pawn one square or the other, otherwise that would have been checkmate. There's no other option. But now I lose my rook. So now I know why, going back a few moves, I know why f3 is a mistake. Because right now f3 is guarding that spot. But once I moved f3, now the knight goes here, which threatens mate, and then picks up my rook afterward. So I had to defend against mate. I lost my rook, so that was a mistake too, wasn't it? Yeah, I should have just taken the knight. But instead I thought I could get the pawn and then the knight. And then my opponent did that, and I resigned. So I did lose some rating points for this one. But anyway, in all three of these games, in 3 of the 4 games, I had advantages, even against much higher rated players, and I gave them away. And in one game, I did not have an advantage, but I had equality at several points and gave it away. And I'm taking encouragement from that those few moments can be corrected if I study these, look at them as I'm doing now. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm going to think twice next time before entering a Blitz tournament. And we'll see you next time.